Namaste. Uh, Hi everyone. This is Tapas. I'm a PhD student in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at IIT Bombay, India. I will be presenting my work as titled "The History of the Development of Discourse Relations in the Paninian Grammatical Tradition." For the whole presentation, this will be my roadmap. But first, let me give you a short introduction to this work. In the history of the Paninian grammar, had any of the well-known Indian schools of thought developed a discourse relations system to demonstrate the cohesiveness of text? We may have the answer if we look into the treasures of the Indian scientific tradition. We come across several works that provide us with the answer to the above question. First and foremost, the Mimamsa school of thought presents the Sangati device for the discourse analysis, which focuses primarily on the Vedic corpus. Furthermore, in terms of the discourse markers that reflect scientific discourse relations, we find fully fledged device, Tantrayukti device, which is more or less methodologies to understand or to interpret or compose the scientific works. There are several texts, namely Arthashastra, Charaka Samhita, Susutta Samhita, Ashtanga Hridaya, and so on, which contain those devices along with the definitions and applications. If we look back to Panini and his contributions, we see the great grammarian Panini authored the text Ashtadhyayi, the foundational text in the Sanskrit grammar. His work introduced several key grammatical concepts that have influenced subsequent linguistic traditions. His rigorous analytical approach laid the groundwork for understanding the syntactic and semantic structures in Sanskrit. If we look at this example taken from the commentary Mahabhashya on the Sutra Samartha Padavidhi from the paper by Kulkarni and Das, look carefully at those discourse units in the form of the boxes. We can see these discourse units are connected to each other by the discourse relations, namely the akshepa, udaharana, pratyudaharana, and so on. There are some important attempts to the Sanskrit discourse. For example, an computational approach by Kulkarni and Das, a very recent work by Vej and Kulkarni on the intersentential discourse relations. An author, namely the Dr. W.K. Lele, in his book The Doctrine of the Tantra Yuktis, asserting about the Tantra Yukti devices regarding the Paninian grammar, as Paninian Ashtadhyayi has made use of 28 devices of a scientific composition, and therefore it is obligatory upon us to make a thorough study of at least those 28 devices to be able to understand fully the Paninian Sutras. So this motivates us to implement those tantric devices in our work of the verbal cognition of the discourse. These are the objectives. Despite the fact that the Tantrayukti devices were originally designed for composing scientific texts and other comparable tasks, these devices are primarily held to be in between text units, not in a single sentence. Okay. So this made me think about this implementation in the discourse analysis with reference to the Shabdaboda system of sentence analysis. As we are dealing with the more or less 40 devices as the discourse relations, we are hoping that being sufficient in number and efficient in the nature, they will capture much detail about the intersentential fact that is above and over the sentence length. Following the Karaka theory, primarily the case endings play a crucial role in marking the sentential relations with respect to the action denoted by the verbal root in a sentence. However, the discourse markers also indicate some relations which are not discussed in our traditional system of thought. So we aim to take advantage of those Tantrayukta devices in terms of the discourse relations which have been employed by Panini as well. So what will be the role of the syntax and semantics in discourse analysis? The interplay between the syntax and semantics is crucial in Panini's framework. Discourse relations are profoundly affected by both syntactic and semantic structures. Specific examples from the classical text also illustrate how these elements interact to produce coherent text or coherent discourse. In the case of pragmatics, the study of language used in the context also plays a vital role in understanding those discourse relations. Now, look at these two diagrams. Let me zoom in. Okay. At the word and sentence level analysis, we see the Karaka theory helps us to capture the co-occurrences, to understand the co-occurrences in terms of the relations. But in the case of this discourse level analysis, what will help us to tag those relations? So of course, the discourse markers help us to capture those relations. But what will be the tags? So this is our hypothetical approach to implement those Tantrayukta devices as the relational tags. Okay. So as I mentioned that we are dealing with the discourse, the group of sentences. So the question comes here is, what will be the notion of sentences and its corresponding meaning? So for now, here in this work, we are following the terminologies provided by my professor Kulkarni sir. So there are two terminologies for sentence and its meaning. First one is Sangrahakam Vakyam, which means that the collective cognizer is sentence. And the second sutra is about the meaning of sentence, Vakyartha. The sutra is Sangraho Vakyartha, which means the collective cognition of meaning is the sentence meaning. Okay. For devices and methods for providing all types of discourse relations, we're using the tantric devices, and for making the annotated data set and using the RST, rhetorical structure theory. It's a very well-known linguistic theory. And for showing the verbal cognition of the elementary discourse units for Sanskrit, we'll stick to the work by Professor Kulkarni, which is the Headedness and Modification in Nyaya Morphosyntactic Analysis. For understanding the tantric devices, we have prepared a detailed and self-explanatory data sheet with every detail about the devices. And this work gives the following features, namely the description, which comprises the etymological and lexical meanings, and the definition, which provides the definitions from across the various texts, namely Charaka Samhita and so on, the concept mapping, also the markers. This is very vital in this work. This provides the exclusive clues to identify the discourse units with the examples. What is the discourse relation? Relations are mainly defined to hold between non-overlapping text paths called anuyogi and pratiyogi, like the satellite and nucleus relationship. And those are marked by the Nyaya syntactic terms, that is Nishta Prakarata and Nishta Visheshyata, that we'll look into in an example. Those tantric devices have been classified in 4 categories by us, namely pragmatic relations or the presentational relations. In this category, the tags like Atidesha, Adhikarana, Anumata falls down. And the semantic category, Adikranta, Vikshana, Apavarga, Uddesha are there. There are some textual relations as well, like Pratyutsara, Pradesha, and so on. Let's look at some of those relations and try to understand them one by one. Anagata Vikshana, which means a reference to the future statement. Anumata, which means the statements of agreement with the opinion of others. Apadesha means it points out a cause and effect relation. Apavarga, this is an exception to the general rule. Ekanta, an invariable rule or the universal statement. Drishtanta, it is used to cite an example. Nirnaya denotes a decisive statement that establishes a conclusion. Nirvachana probes the etymological interpretation or derivational information. Naikanta indicates the statement which are not absolute. That means which vary from context to context. Padartha probes the meaning of a word or a group of words. Purva indicates a statement that is in the form of an objection, and Uttar is the answer to the before statement, that is Purva. These are the possible applications of this four, which is the explicit understanding of a text, a deeper comprehension of a text's conceptual relation structure and how it pertains to coherence. Second, composing a scientific work, namely article, book, so on. So we can get to know how does one create these coherent texts. So it can help with writing effective text as a training tool, generating natural languages, discourse parsings, and analyzing corpora. These are the possible applications. So our main insight is the entire text must be covered by the tree structure without any gap. Okay. For that purpose, we are doing some works on annotation guideline, discourse relation tagging, and tracing the devices into the textual data across the grammatical text, and the Kashika Vritti and so on. We are also trying to do some comparison and finding some dissimilarities also. Now, let's look at the very important goal of us, that is the verbal cognition of discourse. Here we can see a set of three sentences. Ramaha gramam gamishyati. Rama will go home. Tataha grihat sa videsham gamishyati. Then he will go abroad from home. Tadartham sa avedana patram likhati. For that he writes a letter. The concerned authority. Okay. So here you see, second sentence is connected to the first one by the relation anagata vikshana, the future statement. And the third one is connected to the second one by the prayojana, the purpose statement. This can be represented in this format. This is our goal, or you can say this is the output of our work, that is the verbal cognition of the discourse in this form, using the Nyabdyanyaya terms, Nishta Prakarata, Nishta Vishishyata, to achieve the cognition in a whole. So what we have discussed so far is the discourse markers are vital in discourse analysis, as we have observed, with the tantric devices being especially significant. For now, we have successfully identified the Paninian grammar instances using the carefully selected devices. The data used with these devices clearly demonstrates that these tools are sufficient for analyzing the discourse